Today, TC is leading the way in pioneering and advancing new fields of learning, thanks in large part to the philanthropic support of our talented, dedicated students and our world-class scholars like Ernest Morrell. All that we do here is grounded in a belief in the power of educators to excite, inspire, and advocate for positive change in the world. Ernest has the passion and the skill to inspire students to make lasting contributions to improving education. His lecture, Powerful Teaching, Powerful Schools, Engaging Youth in the Digital Age, will lay out a vision for the future of urban education. Ernest earned his BA in English at UC Santa Barbara and returned to Oakland, his hometown, to teach high school English. While earning his doctorate in language literacy and culture at Berkeley, his scholarly interest in school reform and community engagement in education took hold. The questions he began to ask were, what teaching methods work for urban and minority students, and what do teachers, schools of education, and policymakers need to do? He continued to pursue answers to these questions while serving on the faculty of UCLA's Urban Schooling Division of the Graduate School of Education and Information Sciences, and as Associate Director of its Institute for Democracy, Education, and Access, IDEA. Ernest joined TC in 2011 as Professor of English Education and Director of our renowned Institute for Urban and Minority Education, otherwise known as UMI. He was a fitting successor to Ed Gordon, UMI's founder and TC icon, a brilliant teacher and architect of Head Start. Ed started UMI in 1973 with a clear premise. In order to succeed, urban minority children needed excellent teaching and solid out-of-school support to compensate for problems in home and neighborhood environments. Ed greeted Ernest's appointment enthusiastically because they shared common values, including a belief that every child could flourish academically when given the right supports by school, families, and communities. UMI continues to flourish, to thrive under Ernest's leadership as he and his team are finding new, innovative ways to translate empirical research into policy and practice. At heart, Ernest is a teacher committed to making learning relevant and impactful. He spends lots of time nurturing young talent, particularly marginalized youth. In 2014, Ernest was named a Fellow of the American Educational Research Association. He's authored numerous academic books, articles, and reviews, and Critical Media Pedagogy, Teaching for Achievement in City Schools, published by Teachers College Press, and I saw out on a table in the hall. Co-authored with a number of others, won the Choice Magazine's 2014 Outstanding Academic Title Award. He's president of the 50,000-member National Council of Teachers of English, leading advocacy campaigns for policy change. Ernest describes himself as an ambassador for a set of ideas. He wants to take ideas working in some schools out to the rest of the world, and he's going to tell us all about that tonight, and you'll see what inspiring and advocating really means when you hear from Ernest Morrell. Come, join us.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Am I on? Yes. All right, cool. Good evening. All right, so we're all warmed up. I have to thank President Furman for that introduction. Thank you all for braving the elements and being here. This is the first time I've actually been able to speak at Teachers College since I interviewed for the job exactly 5 years ago this month. It was March 2010, and a lot has happened since then, and I'm really excited to tell you about it, the work that I've been doing, but also the work that we, as President Furman mentioned, the team that is UMI have been engaged in. The title of the talk is something I've been thinking about for a while, and hopefully this will evolve into a larger book project, but Powerful Teaching and Powerful Schools. What does it mean to engage youth in the digital age? I'll talk about what I mean by this idea, engagement, and why I think it's one of the most important concepts to think about in education. But I also want to talk about it from a particular standpoint that Susan also mentioned. Powerful teaching and powerful schools are among us today. It's not that we have to invent powerful teaching or powerful schools. We need to understand what makes powerful teaching powerful as it exists today. What makes those schools that are powerful, and how can we replicate that? How can we take it to scale, so to speak? So that's kind of what I'll be talking about. Key principles that I have found in my work, moving into 25 years that I have been doing this work, and how I think together they offer this vision. As I said, this vision that is among us. So if you want to join the conversation, I know that our Yumi folks will be tweeting. These are a couple of handles and hashtags. TC's handle, Yumi, the Institute's handle, mine. Powerful Teaching, I think, is a good hashtag for this. But also hashtag Yumi, and that's my email at the bottom if you want to find me or get a hold of me. So I like to start at the beginning. Powerful teaching and powerful schools, I argue, is an opportunity for us to reinvent ourselves, to think differently about what the future of American education should be. And I think it's important to start with our past. This is a group of women in a sewing factory about 100 years ago, and I use this image a lot with young kids, and I ask them what it looks like, and they say, it looks like school. And there's a real reason for that. As you think about, for most of human history, most people did not go to school until about 100, maybe 150 years ago. And the reason that a lot of them were going to schools is because they began to migrate into cities and they began to get jobs in industry where they needed literacy skills. So our first schools really began with this image in mind. First schools for 95% of the population began with this idea of kind of preparing somebody for a work life in a factory. And if you look at the similarity of this first century of public education, what it was aiming toward and what classrooms look like, you see a lot of similarities between the two. And I'm not saying this wasn't a powerful teaching. You could argue that it was very powerful in the sense that within 50 years we transformed from a primarily agrarian economy to an industrial economy. You went from very low literacy level rates to almost universal literacy in Western nations. And so this could be argued as a powerful teaching and a powerful school model for the first century of public education. But if you think about where we are today, right on the verge of our second century, and I like to think of that as understanding this is still really an experiment. What schools are supposed to mean, we're still figuring it out. But in our second century, we have a different aesthetic, right? You look at these images, and we have more time, I'd ask you to shout out some of the things that you see, but people will say, oh, there's technology, right? They're facing each other, they're more engaged, there are all sorts of different kinds of skills. When I ask the students, the first thing they say is they're happy. They look much happier than those women in the sewing factory. And I say, well, what I think they are is engaged. Right? And it's a different kind of aesthetic. So what kind of educational system do we need? What does powerful teaching look like? What does a powerful school look like if this is the world that we're preparing students for? Or this is the beginning of the world that we're preparing students to reinvent, right? It requires something different of us. So I think that it's important to start with that and understanding that as society changes, as the demands for the educated person change, schools have to change. Our notion of what a powerful school has to change. Our notion of what a powerful classroom is has to change. So with that in mind, the work that I do, I center it with 3 key questions, and you'll see how I keep coming back to these questions throughout the presentation and the work that I do. The first one is what I call the question we should be asking instead of the achievement question. That is the excitement question. Right? How do we get kids excited about learning? Right? If you get them excited, you get them engaged. If you get them engaged, you get them motivated. If you get them motivated, you get them thinking about themselves differently. You raise achievement. So when I work in schools with kids a lot, I talk about getting into the tiger crouch. I have these rules, and the very first one is a tiger crouch. This was something I learned in high school when I was actually preparing for the SAT as a student athlete. So psychologists told us how your brain operates when you're in a tiger crouch. I can tell a lot about how a student feels about herself, her class, what's going on in that environment by whether or not she's in that tiger crouch. How do we teach young people into that tiger crouch? How do we get them excited about learning? That's the first question. The second question, it's related. How do we develop students' literate identities or their academic identities? That they see themselves not as reading and writing or doing math. They see themselves as writers or mathematicians. Whether they're 6 years old or 16 years old. A student who says, I'm a mathematician, is in a totally different mind state to do mathematics than the kid who says, I can't add or subtract or multiply or divide. What do we do in the educational transaction? What do we do in powerful teaching, or what do we do in a powerful school to change identities? How students think about themselves. The third question, how do we make it socially, culturally, and technologically relevant? I'll talk a lot about this term relevance as well, because I think that the idea of relevance is so important to the idea of engagement. I'll talk about this later on, but I have a very simple equation that for me equals engagement. Confidence plus relevance equals engagement. Right? So if I have that identity, if I see myself as someone who can do this, that's the confidence. If it's connected to my life socially, if it's connected culturally, if it's connected technologically, that's the relevance. You raise the confidence, you raise the relevance, you raise the engagement. How do we make them excited? How do we change identities? How do we make it socially, culturally, and technologically relevant? So with that, I'll talk about these 5 principles, characteristics, whatever you want to call them, of the powerful teaching and powerful schools. The first of them is school culture. The second is powerful teaching. The third is youth engagement. The fourth is parent involvement. And the fifth is social supports. So I only have less than an hour to talk, so I can't go in deep detail about all of them, but I will focus the talk on 2 and 3, the powerful teaching and the youth engagement, but I will talk a little bit about each of the 5, and then I'll kind of bring it together at the end with where I think we can go forward. So this first one, school culture. And a lot of times, we think about a powerful school, and they're evaluated normally in one way, and that's by test. Right? Testing outcomes determine what a powerful school is. So a lot of the conversations about what makes a powerful school has to do with students' academic outcomes as narrowly measured by a standardized test, usually. I argue that there's so much more to what makes a powerful school environment, a powerful school climate, and a powerful school culture that we're not even asking the right questions to measure, right? What does that space look like that the student is studying within, right? How does he or she feel about themselves inside of the school? Do they feel like they belong? Do they feel like they're connected? Is the school connected to the larger community? Are they dealing with problems that they see on a day-to-day basis? Is school a place where I can come and be affirmed, or is it a place where I come and I'm tested? So I start, before we get to the powerful teaching, and everyone wants the curriculum stuff with, well, what do we do to create a powerful school culture? Or once you even kind of wrap your mind around that term, and you think, well, do we have a powerful school culture? And then I think that we can move to asking a different set of questions about what we do at school. There's all sorts of reasons why a positive school climate is important. What we want is students to feel better about themselves when they are at school, to feel better about school, to feel better about each other, to talk to one another, to experience success, but also to have a purpose. There's a school that I've worked with, and during the time that the principal has been at this school, they've doubled their graduation rate from just below 40% to now over 80%. And there's a motto at the school that says, "We all sweat." Right, and it's just like, it's on doors, it's on the back of chairs, and so the students know they have a purpose. We're about something at this school, and I argue that that's a huge reason why he's experiencing the kind of success that he has. School climate and achievement. A positive school climate improves students' academic identities. We know that it increases academic achievement, and you can see this in schools that are turning around by all factors, right? They're turning around in terms of test scores and that sort of thing, but they're raising their graduation rates. Students feel better about themselves. So we know that schools can change, right? We know that it can happen. It is happening. We can point to schools around us, and the question is not, can schools change? It's why aren't all schools changing the way that powerful schools are changing? Increasing collaboration and communication, that it's not just me as an isolated individual at this school. I'm actually part of a larger collective. I have a colleague in the University of California system who does research on dropouts. One of the biggest reasons for dropouts that the schools can do something about is kids, when they feel disconnected, they feel no one cares about them, they feel that they're invisible on that campus, they're much more likely to drop out. So when I'm working, when I feel like I'm going to be missed, when I know the teachers care about me, when I have a project to do with my colleagues and I can't let them down, I'm connected to that school in a very different way, right? They need me there. And that you see in the schools that are really addressing the dropout rate. An increasing connection to local and global context. I call it the, I'm interested in becoming an intellectual, and becoming an intellectual allows me to intervene positively in the lives of people I love. Right? It's not just about do this and you'll go to college, and do this and you'll get a good job. Learn these things and you can make people's lives better. Right? You can be an actor in the world. Right? It's that kind of thing that happens with a powerful school climate. Now, the most important thing that I found that is connected across those dots of powerful school climate is cultivating young people's voices. Right? We know, by definition, young people have something to say. They are motivated about something. The question is not whether a young person is motivated. It's, are they motivated about the kinds of things that you want them to be motivated about? And that might be the wrong question. The right question might be, how can I get motivated around the things they're motivated about? Right? How can I turn their motivations into my science lesson? How can their motivations become the essays that we do, or the films that we make, or the conferences we put on, or the brochures we write, or the campaigns that we advocate for in the community? Knowing how to say what I want to say is the foundation of all of my literacy work. Right? If there is something inside of me that I want to say, but I do not know how to say it, that's when I need you as a teacher. How can you help me say this? How can we say this more powerfully? There's all sorts of things inside of my head, but I'm limited by my connection to academic literacies. And this is where I need that kind of help. So I can feel good about my ability to say it. I can say it with authority and power, and I can use it to work together for change. Powerful school climates understand the importance of attachments. Right? And we're getting better at this, I think, with the social and emotional learning and social and emotional standards that a lot of states and a lot of districts have now. But don't underestimate the importance of these 4 attachments in all of the students that are in your school. Attachments to the academic world. This is not something I do, it's something I am, or something I am becoming. Right? So the title of my first book was Becoming Critical Researchers, and it wasn't that I said, we have to read more, we have to write more, we have to study more. So how can we become researchers who use the information we collect to change the community? So I'm becoming a critical researcher, or I'm becoming a playwright, becoming a spoken word artist, becoming a great debater, becoming a scientist, becoming a historian. In that becoming, right, I become attached to the academic world. So it's not something I do, it's who I am. That attachment is supreme. Attachments to others in the classroom. If we go back to the women in the sewing factory model, it may be March and I might not know the girl's name who sits behind me in class and has been back there since September. Because I've never turned around. I can't tell you what color her eyes are. I don't even know what she's wearing. Right? Connection to others in the classroom. So how does it become something we do together? Right? Where, like I said, this is a project we've been working on since September. This is my study group, right? We spend 2 days a week together in this group and we're working on this project. It's a totally different kind of attachment. A totally different kind of attachment. Attachment to the larger school community. Like that this is my school. It's not the school I attend, it's my school. And attachments to the larger social world. That what we do in school connects us to this larger social world that we care about and we live within. And what are some of the things that the schools are doing? All sorts of really, like I said, amazing kinds of things are happening. Poetry clubs and poetry slams. I've seen schools put on youth summits where instead of a science fair, young people are coming and sharing their social action research projects and putting on conferences and speaking in this sort of way to each other. Town hall meetings where young people can express their concerns and their ideas. Anti-bullying campaigns, anti-violence campaigns. Getting whole walls of the school. I can take you through schools where student murals adorn the walls and doors and classrooms. Teaching about ethics, having extended day programs where students can come and get breakfast from 7, 8 o'clock and they can have an afternoon snack and enrichment activities from 3 to 5 or so. Project-based learning and community service are all sorts of kinds of things that schools are doing, and they're moving toward that idea of really embracing this notion of this school being a culture and not just a place where individuals come to get academic learning. It's a huge shift. Second, powerful teaching. No need to talk about why this is important, but let's talk about what we mean by that and some really, I think, unique examples of the kind of powerful teaching that's happening. These are principles that I have kind of culled together after all these years. I call it Powerful Teaching 4.0, voice, affirmation, achievement, purpose, and love. Helping young people to say what they want to say, voice. Building students' confidence, being relevant to their lives, honoring their cultures, families, neighborhoods, and communities. Affirmation. No one should be disaffirmed by the academic project. It's almost impossible to be motivated in a project that by definition disaffirms who you are and who you love. 3, achievement. It should promote a discipline and engagement beyond your wild expectations. Gloria Ladson-Billings, she'll talk about the kind of the first principle of her culturally relevant pedagogies. It has to lead to excellence, or it's not worth doing. You know what they say in athletics, go big or go home. Right? We don't want mediocre ideas. We do not want small ideas in our classroom. We do not want small amounts of achievement. We want excellence. We have to define that in a very different way, but that is what we want. Achievement, purpose. Right? Students create products in the classroom that have a purpose now, not when you're 37 and you have a mortgage and 3 kids. Right? That is an abstract concept for your 7th grader. But something that we will do by Thanksgiving, and we will take this to the mayor, and we will take it to the governor if the mayor doesn't listen, we'll take it to the president if the governor doesn't listen, is an entirely different context for learning. You do not have to tell that student to read, right? Because reading is what they need to do to communicate with speaking the truth to power. And love. This is not our love for students, which I think is important, but it is tapping into that natural love that young people have for the world, and the love that they have for people in the world. So we're doing this in a lot of ways. It also taps into a notion of teacher learning that is built around teachers working together, sustained professional engagement, collaborative projects, connected to practice, having teachers as critical action researchers, asking questions in their classroom, and scaled up through knowledge dissemination and production. This is work that I've been doing a lot in my 4 years as NCTE president. It's work that Ernest Morrell is leading at the Institute through the Literacy Teachers Initiative, where we have teachers all over Harlem that are kind of asking key questions in their classroom and doing action research and communicating that. They just came back from a conference in Philadelphia where they're sharing their work. We also do this, like I said, at NCTE. We have a report on kind of remodeling the conditions for learning and having teachers work together. That's a picture of us down there kind of sharing this work on Capitol Hill. This also comes from a whole lot of work that I've been doing over the past quarter century in classrooms across the country where this kind of powerful teaching and powerful teacher learning is happening. So what does it look like? And I'll just run through a number of examples. I try to choose them across disciplines, across age ranges, and across geographies. This first one is what we call the Critical Minds Project. This began a decade ago, maybe over a decade ago, in Southern California. It was a class of 9th graders in a school that had, for this particular group, almost an 80% dropout rate. And the school's graduation rate was below 50%, and so there were freshmen who were on the verge of dropout, and they were put in this particular class, and it was 14 boys out of 20 students. It was a 2-hour block after lunch, and it was put in the bungalows way on the other side of campus, and it was given to a first-year teacher. Who is the positive side of the story works out, and this teacher is one of the co-authors of that critical media pedagogy book that Susan talked about. But when we went in, and she asked me to come and look at the class, and it was really chaotic, and I said, what do the students talk about when they're excited? She says, the only thing they talk about when they're excited is life in East LA. And so, well, let's have them write about it. So we created this project, A Day in My Life. And we had done the critical memoir work before, but I took them through a set of prompts. What's the first thing you see when you wake up in the morning? What happens on your way to school? What happens when you get to school? What happens, on the way home from school? And so the students began to write and write and write and write. One of the students said, no one has ever asked me about a day in my life. So fast forward, the students end up writing these essays, and they want to do digital essays around the essays that they wrote. We ended up bringing them to the university to present. They published in a local magazine. We tracked those students, and all the students who stayed in the school 3 years later were on track to graduate. Right, and a lot of them trace it back to this Critical Minds Project, and then they ended up creating a blog and sharing this blog and a Twitter feed and Facebook and all that sort of stuff. But they got awakened when a teacher asked them to write about their lives. This Auto-ethnography Project, this is one we did on the East Coast with that school that I mentioned that doubled its graduation rate. One of the things that the principal wanted to do was to create an entry project for all 9th graders. So we created this 18-week project where students started with exploring themselves, myself, through poetry and through narrative and short story writing. They did 6 weeks where they went to kind of my community and they were investigating questions in their community, and they started by developing their own questions. They ended with my world. At the end of the first semester, they had a portfolio that had quantitative statistics and research, narrative writing, poetry, one-act screenplays, and journalistic writing and qualitative research, and they shared that with each other. These 35, 40-page research portfolios that they had put together, getting into reading and writing, getting into 9th grade level math, but also asking questions about growing up in New Jersey, right? And it was an amazing project and part of an amazing school. As you know, we've done a lot of work with critical media pedagogy, having young people be kind of critical consumers of the media that they watch and that they read and that they listen to, but also critical producers of the media, having them ask key questions about the images that they receive, whether those images are kind of via their phone or a billboard or movies that they watch or songs that they listen to. What values are promoted? What does it mean to be cool? What does it mean to be normal or desired? And we get them to be critical of these kinds of images that they are bombarded with by the millions in their formative years. If we know that these images are responsible for life and death with our young people that we care so much about, why do we talk so little about reading the media in schools? Right? I want my 10-year-old daughter or son to have already had this conversation, right? To have the skills to break. Who made this? For what reason? How would they like you to think about yourself so that you can buy what they're selling? So we do the critical media pedagogy with the young people, but we also, instead of just having them be consumers, work on having them be producers. Young people as playwrights, young people as digital filmmakers. In class we have 1-minute public service announcement contest where whatever the issue is, whether it's history or science or math, we can create an issue, have the students study that issue, use their cell phones, create a 1-minute public service announcement, and judge the public service announcements. We put them on the websites and they share them, right? They do the reading, they do academic work, they develop digital technologies, and they are socially engaged. We work with young people as digital poets, sharing their work, whether it's hip-hop poetry, spoken word poetry, through digital medium. We also have a project here, youth historians in Harlem. Some of you have seen these young people. They were in the building. I don't know if any of them made it into the room. All right, wherever you are in the back, where young people are becoming historians as high school students, unpacking histories of reproduction and resistance in their own neighborhood. You know, one of the things that my colleague Jeff Duncan Andrade and I talk about in terms of rethinking social studies, I mean, you will learn the history of Mesopotamia, but you will never learn about your own block. Right? But you could spend 12 years and no one can tell you how you got to your block. Why not start with the block and work our way back to Mesopotamia? Right? Unpacking the history, but it's not just being a consumer of history, it's being engaged in the production of historical knowledge, because histories are made to be remade. These narratives are told to be retold, especially from the perspective of people that are living them day to day. Right? So this is a project. Young people are doing that kind of work. They are telling the history of life in Harlem. They are learning valuable skills about how to construct historical narratives. They're learning archival research. They're learning oral history research. They're presenting their work at colleges, traveling around, and gaining not only valuable academic skills, but a different kind of two boots on the ground knowledge of life in the community. At the same time, they're acquiring academic literacies. This is a project we have on the West Coast. I'm stuck. There we go. Project we have on the West Coast with another UMI graduate student fellow, Katy de los Rios. Raza studies in a high school English class, right? Reading Chicano and Chicana literature, hip-hop, popular culture, community advocacy. Right now, Katy is kind of up to her elbows in data of these young people engaging the discipline of English and Raza studies at the same time, learning about their neighborhood, becoming powerful producers of knowledge, at the same time that they're acquiring academic skills. They're becoming public intellectuals and academicians and cultural historians at the same time. Cyphers for Justice is another one of our YUMI projects. Limaris Caraballo and Jamila Liscott are in there. It's hard to tell. They're so young, but the other people around them are high school students. And you can tell me in the pictures. I'm not young like them anymore. But this is an annual youth summit. This is actually here. You can tell it's Millbank Chapel, right? But their Millbank Chapel is filled with young people, high school students, talking about the work that they've been doing all year, the research projects, the critical research, how they've been digital advocates, how they've been engaged with their community. And so you have PowerPoint slides, and you have poetry slams, you have like a hip-hop artist and dance and all these sorts of things. And it's a cipher, young people working for justice, using digital technologies and academic literacies at the same time to facilitate community in powerful, powerful ways. The Urban Debate is another project coordinated by Jen Johnson, who's another graduate student fellow, where these young people are traveling all over to Harvard and Yale, meeting the president, doing forensic debate with a twist, using multiple literacies from the neighborhood and the community, as well as kind of literacies from the academy, and they're killing it, right? I mean, they are dominating students from independent schools, and we put on a summer institute for them a couple summers ago, where they were here from 9 to 5, reading philosophy and reading critical theory and learning the skills of forensic debate. This is what students want, right? It's not easy to come 9 to 5 in the summertime on the subway from all the boroughs in Brooklyn and the Bronx. But if you're coming because you're becoming a great debater and you're using that great debating techniques that you're learning to advocate for things that you care about, then all of a sudden it's worth it to get on the subway and go 90 minutes both ways and to spend 10 hours inside of a building in Columbia University 5 days a week learning how to debate. I'm sick of hearing about how unmotivated young people are. They're filled with motivation, they're filled with beauty, they're filled with intellect, they're filled with love. We're asking the wrong questions, asking them to do the wrong sorts of things, starting with the wrong propositions. But where powerful learning is happening, it's building on what young people want. Black Masculinities is work that Crystal Bell, another YUMI graduate student fellow, is doing. Put on a Trayvon Effect conference on a weekend. Had students coming from 2 states away, right? To grieve and to build, to vent and to innovate and inspire and think about new sorts of ways of reclassifying, recategorizing, understanding just exactly who young black men are in this society, right? If you create it, they will come. Right, we have the anniversary of Trayvon's death, and it's not an issue, right? Except for in the lives of these young people and those who advocate for them. Right? You create the Trayvon conference, you will have young people coming from 2 states away saying, this is a conversation we've been dying to have. Can we have it in the history class? And understand, Jim Crow legislation in that kind of context, how it connects to what's going on in Ferguson or even Staten Island. Right? Yeah, right? Out there? All right, you out there? Okay, I'm just checking, a little bit of call and response, right? Just get the spirit every now and then, right? Yes, right. I won't fall down. But this is the kind of work. This is that powerful teaching and learning that is happening in our midst on a day-to-day basis. Critical qualitative research. So this is work that colleagues and I did where we were connecting youth research to mathematical development. Young people were asking questions about educational inequity, but they were using quantitative research, and this study showed that they were improving their mathematical reasoning abilities, and they were identifying more with mathematics. They were taking harder math classes in school connected to this research they were doing in the community. These are some of the slides. These are slides produced by young people, right? Graduation requirements. They were attending the school that is in the pink, and comparing it to a very wealthy school, you could do the similar comparisons between New York and the suburbs that are right outside of New York. But graduation rates and requirements for college are directly correlated to median household income. And they're doing surveys. They're surveying, thousands of young people and getting their opinion on how they think about issues in the world. This is a methodology slide that's created by high school students, analyzing 200 surveys, dropout rates, push-out rates, grade distribution, right? This is the kind of stuff that you might do on a master's thesis. When they're putting together these kinds of profiles, they're doing community portraits, racial demographics, right? All these, every slide I'm showing you right now is a slide that's created by high school youth in a quote-unquote urban school, a quote-unquote failing urban school. This is the kind of work that they do. And this just blows me away. Using geographic information systems, what they were doing in these slides is showing how population changes, essentially white flight from the city between 1960 and 2000 was attributable to the loss of jobs, but they were also able to look at the change in educational policy in Los Angeles Unified over the 40 years as the population began to change. So the red represents the Latino population, the blue represents African American population. They laid these maps on top of each other using census data and plugging it in point by point in geographic information system software, sophomores and juniors in high school. This is 1970. This is 1980. This is 1990. And in 2000, you have a city that is a city school system that is 90% non-white. Right? We could talk substantively about what this means and all sorts of things in terms of how the education policy changed, how that band did not get re-equipped after 1970, right? And all these fancy things that are in the school that are no longer being updated, right? And people are shaking their heads. You went to a post-industrial school too, right? But what is amazing to me is if I told you that a team of Stanford sociologists did this research, you would believe it. High school kids. In this project, the director from 1999 to 2011, we had a 100% graduation rate. The students that were involved in this program, 100. Number 3, youth engagement. What does it mean to engage young people? We formulate our youth engagement around participatory action research, literacy, and social action. We start our work with young people with 2 key questions, right? If you could change the world, what's one thing you would do? If you could change your community, what's one thing you could do? Asking those 2 questions, I would argue, I can build a curriculum at any age and any discipline around young people changing the world and changing their communities, because we've done it. We have a process, right? It begins with identifying a problem, developing a question, designing a study, all the way to creating products, but not just research reports. Those products could be films, it could be websites, it could be Twitter campaigns, it could be hashtags, it could be a youth conference, it could be a march, and taking some sort of social action. And we look at this work in terms of how it has led to academic development and social action. One of the projects, we have students doing oral history. This is another project, this one's back from the West Coast, in an English class, reading a book like Bless Me Ultima, and using that to understand stories of migration and immigration in the context of Latin America and the Southwest. As they're reading a story that talks about these very same things, they're interviewing people in their community, putting this together, donating those digitized interviews to a city archive, and then sharing it back with the community. 9th graders. Right, becoming oral historians. This is a younger group. This was a youth summit we put on. 3rd graders researching equity and access in education, reading the story of Ruby Bridges. This is the group, right? Look at the age of these kids. They ended up looking at inequities across school systems based on the socioeconomic makeup of a particular community. And this is a letter written by a 3rd grader to her area superintendent talking about what we don't like. We don't have enough school supplies, our restrooms are dirty, our school lunch is nasty. I mean, I just love the honesty of a 3rd grader. We don't have enough paper, we don't have enough work. But she talks about the interviews that they did, right? That they actually, this is based on data that we collected. Then they did oral history, right? They interviewed teachers, asked them questions about what life was like when they went to school and whether they thought it was better or worse. This one I also love. Slide, Amy. And rich schools, and they said, well, at least there's some good teachers, right? We both have some good teachers, but they get to order off a menu. We got raggedy food, dirty bathrooms, and no grass. Sound familiar? Right? Does it sound familiar? I can go into the heart of any urban center in this country, and I've done it, and drive 10 miles and find a well-funded, highly resourced school. So that's not lost on the students. Right, it's not lost on the students. You could do it from New York, right? And you could find a school that was in Westchester, out Long Island, somewhere, right? Why do we allow that in a country that is supposed to be one public? Why multiple school systems, multiple opportunities? Right, so they developed a play, they acted this out, and so this is all part of a youth summit, third graders and fourth graders and fifth graders talking to third, fourth, and fifth graders about research they did in their neighborhood, solutions that they have to offer. Surprise, in this particular project, the students had the highest test scores in the sub-district. The first group of those students that started as fourth graders came through our program that we had for the high school. They're now sophomores in college. Right? They started doing this kind of work when they were 9, 10 years old. Traveling around, we bring them to AERA. If you've seen them, you've seen these folks. Number 4, parent engagement. We think about this in 3 ways, right? That move beyond what I tell my child. The parent-child relationship is important, but 2 areas that we really try to push on is parent-school engagement, and the third one, parent-to-parent. Right? What happens when 2 parents talk to each other and realize that they have the same issue? Or 4 parents? Or 16 parents? Right? That's a movement. Right? So what does it mean to think about engagement as advocating for my child, but also advocating for our children? As parent liaisons, parents on participatory action research. In this particular document, 21st Century Parent U-Turn was a group that I worked with for many, many years. They did the participatory action research right alongside the students. So we talk about collective parenting as having conversations with one another and having conversations with the system. Documenting, parents distributing surveys, parents asking for school climate research, parents conducting focus groups, parents talking with each other and bringing data to bear on the kinds of things that they want to see changed in their schools. And number 5, social supports. We would be remiss to think about education as happening in a vacuum and not understanding that we have young people in our classrooms that are dealing with all sorts of social toxins and trauma. What happens at 7 o'clock in the morning is still on your mind when you're taking that test at 9 o'clock in the morning. And we pretend as though these contexts are not out there, that these kids do not have lives, and that part of what should happen in education, and Sean Jenright, who we're bringing out to speak this spring, talking about education as radical healing. What kind of supports are we providing in our schools to provide that radical healing? Dealing with hunger. One of the schools that I think that one of the biggest reasons for the change, they have breakfast, they have lunch, and then they have a meal after school, and the kids are, they get 3 meals at school. Right? That does not go to waste. And they can't wait. They have a snack, and it was all a part of a grant. Seeking partnerships. What kind of partnerships do we need to develop? What other folks do we need in the building besides teachers, principals, and coaches? Right? How do we rethink the school as a community in that way? Lit clubs. It's an organization I'm on the board of here in New York City. They have these after-school clubs where young people can come and they have access to technology and they're writing their own stories. And we're expanding. I think there's going to be over 100 clubs in the Detroit Public Schools this summer. Their evening and their summer programs. And family literacy nights. Why can't we do that sort of thing? So to conclude, what are some of the evidence-based benefits? I talked about high school graduation, college going, that project 1999-2011, 100% graduation rate. Program we ran 1994-1999, 95% graduation rate. We'll collect that kind of information on the projects we have now in this generation from 2011 to beyond, but I guarantee you it will be close to 100%. Academic achievement, development of critical literacies, school-wide achievement. We talked about schools going from below 40% to over 80% graduation rates, and schools actually improving on their test scores. Increased social awareness and social action. These are not antithetical to one another. These things all happen at the same schools. The schools that are about social action, increased social awareness, and critical literacies are the very schools where there is increased graduation rates and academic achievement. And they're talked about as though one is antithetical to, you have rigor and then you have social engagement. The social engagement is the only way that you're going to get 100% of the students interested in the rigor, is because they care about the social engagement. So to finish, my colleague, my partner in crime, Jeff Duncan Andrade, talks about critical hope, right? And that is hope as resilience and resistance in the face of overwhelming odds. He talks about growing roses from concrete, right? If you do not have that hope, do not teach the babies. I don't want anybody without that hope teaching my child. That hope is our obligation, right? We operate in the public trust. The public trust. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles send their children to us 6-8 hours of the day, go on to be productive members of society, counting on us to love their children. Through discipline, through rigor, through engagement, through excitement, through literacy, through music, through the arts, through science, through history, through foreign languages, but to love their children. That is critical hope. It does not have to be easy, but it is possible. And as long as it is possible, you have to maintain that hope. What has love got to do with it? Everything. Everything. Jeff and I wrote the Art of Critical Pedagogy. We got down to the last chapter, and the very end of that book is 6 pages or so about revolutionary love. They said everyone wants our curriculum, as if they think that's the difference. I go to schools all over. They almost all have the same curriculum, but the difference is in the love. What does that revolutionary love look like from the context of a classroom? Finally, the joy of living a committed life. You know, I am the child of educators. My parents have been educating collectively over 95 years. Married to an educator. My father-in-law is an educator. It's the only thing I've done in my adult life. And it saddens me that we don't think about this as a joy and a privilege. One of the things my mom always says is, don't let anyone take away the privilege of teaching people's babies. Father said, I want to retire a dreamer. Right? No one's taken away my dreams. There is joy in a committed life. There is joy in having that purpose. There is joy in the camaraderie. There is joy in the eternalness of it, that is a gift, and it gives and it gives and it gives and it gives and it gives. I don't know another profession like that. There is joy in this work. And you should see that joy. And finally, I want to acknowledge 2 committed lives and folks in UME. Veronica Holly, our assistant director, Ed Gordon, who have been, there from the beginning of this institute. And this is life work for us, right? This is our committed life. And I want to thank my whole UME team. This is a collective effort. This has been a 4-year journey for me, and it could not be a more profound experience to do that with other people who love those children, who love justice, who love through education as powerfully as you want to aspire to. We are committed at UME. This is the work that we do. This is the future of education. This is the power that is possible. I will conclude with a quote from mentor Asa Hilliard. I have never encountered any children in any group who are not geniuses. There is no mystery on how to teach them. The first thing you do is treat them like human beings. And the second thing you do is love them. Thank you. All right, so I finished pretty quickly. There's still, I think, 12 minutes for questions. Right? I was running through. I think that for recording purposes, they'd like you to come up. People have to go. I understand. Thank you for coming. I know the weather's been crazy. I'm really humbled that people will come out on a night like tonight. But we have time for a few questions if people want to ask. Yes, Rebecca.
Hi, Dr. Morrell. My co-teacher and I work in Harlem School, and we're interested in getting involved in some of these projects. And I'm just wondering what the best way to do that would be. It's a middle high school.
Yeah. So the question is how to get involved in. Every project has been organic, and I think a couple things have to happen. There has to be commitment from folks at that particular organization that they want to do something. Then after that is just beginning a conversation and figuring out what the work looks like. Right? When we're interested in building, it takes a while. And I've been here 4 years, and I think there's so much more to do. It's such a huge district, and there's so much going on out there, and it's just kind of connecting, having a conversation. We're nowhere near the capacity of what this institute can be. And I speak on behalf of all the UME folks around that we would welcome it. Yes?
So I've been here for almost 3 years. I'm in a credentialing program, but I've never had a class here that taught me to do in my classroom the kind of things that you're talking about.
Where are you?
So what should I be taking?
That's I think that what needs to happen, right, and I've seen this over the course of my life, from being fired and denied tenure as a high school teacher, and this being on the edge, this is the new education, right? This should be in every class. I don't know, like from department to department, but I know this is the new English, right? This isn't extra, this isn't, once they master the skills, the only way that you are going to get kids interested is the engagement. What I think we have to do is kind of politely insist that this become the new education, right? I didn't have it either in my classes. Right? I never had a credential program class that said, here, read some critical pedagogy. I had to do that as an educator. But I think what I tried to do is show that not only is it possible, but it is necessary. Right? It is necessary. How can we create study groups within our particular credential programs and say, this is what we want to do in music education. This is what we want to do in social studies. This is what we want to do with our elementary education. Can we read these books in class, or do we have to do it as a study group? And that's what I try to do. My philosophy is not necessarily confrontation, but inspiration. What can I do to inspire you to think this way? But we know that the mass of what we're doing is not working. Right? Einstein says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Right? You have to do something different if you want a different result. So I think that we just have to figure out how to come together as collectives inside of our programs and demand a rethinking of teacher education. Yes?
So I love your work, as many people in here do, and I think a lot of us in here would like to say that we are hoping to challenge the deficit that's so omnipresent in schools of education as well as in educational research. But how do we do that in our work in challenging this lens and providing new framework and additive lens? How do we bring this into the mainstream when we're continuously otherized, if that's the word, within educational research and schools of education?
That's a great question. I mean, it's a challenge, right? What I tried to do, and it wasn't easy 20 years ago to bring a boombox in the class and have people listen to hip hop lyrics. So there's sorts of things I see happening all over the country. But what I think you can do is try to find some common ground. Right? What is it that we all agree upon? We'd like to get those heads off the desk. One of the things I do when I'm working with schools or with particularly the superintendent or school board, I'll say, let's go walk through a campus. And we'll look. At the end of that day, they'll say, okay, what do you got? Right? I mean, their defenses are down. It's because you can't keep doing this stuff. And so I think that we have to hold ourselves accountable for doing social justice work, we're doing progressive work, that how can I make an argument to a reasonable skeptic, to someone's mom who says, why do they have a camera? Shouldn't they be writing essays? I can say, Mom, you don't understand, it's a digital age, right? I have to talk to that whether she loves that child and say, well, we are writing essays. And as they do the filmmaking, it's going to increase their desire to write even more. This is the kind of stuff that we're doing. So I think that we have to engage. Everyone who disagrees with us is not an enemy. Right? Many of those people, we need to have a different kind of conversation. And I try to talk from success. Students, their heads are off the desk. Right? They're doing more work. And we take pictures and we record everything. That becomes, I think, a powerful rhetoric that's hard to deny, even for that small slice of people who really are enemies. Because how can you be against success? See, give me a definition of success, a real one. Let's have a conversation about it, and we'll meet it. Right? That first level of success is engagement. Maybe we have time. Yeah, we have time for a few more. It's 6:53. We'll end promptly 7. Yes.
Ernest, what do you say to the students who are in schools where they're really focused on tests and test scores, and the life of learning seems to be dampened by that goal?
Mm-hmm.
What do you tell teachers and tell principals who are so worried about that, whose jobs seem dependent?
That's a great question, Sharon. I mean, so part of the principles that I share, I don't talk about curriculum a great deal, because I don't think that that's the deal maker, deal breaker, even though these projects are kind of curriculum. What are the non-negotiables that you can do regardless? How do you show care for students, right? How do you show regard? How do you get them engaged? And I find very, very few schools, to be honest, that totally 100% kind of litigate the how of how you get them. That's all over the country. So So what are things that you can do? What are the spaces that you can exploit? They say you have to teach this novel, but how do you teach it? Right? They say you have to read this book, but how do you read it? They say there needs to be a project, but what sort of project? But at the same time, I say don't be alone. Right? One of the reasons we have all these members in NCTE, as you know, is because they don't want to be alone. They want to be a part of a collective. They want to use research. They want to take their professional development time and say, well, this is what we're reading in the research, and this is what's happening in the field, this is what's going on in other schools. You have to advocate together, and I think you have to bring a theory of change. One is, what do I do in this classroom in terms of kind of manifesting an ethic of love and care? It's a non-negotiable. Right? How do I do that? And second, how do I take advantage of the spaces that do exist? Three, how do I collectively build to create other spaces? Right? I see that happening. The classrooms where we did the critical media book were, the schools were as kind of rigorous on the test, and you had to write your objectives on the board. And if you wrote your objectives on the board, the principal came in, and you were not meeting those objectives, right in that moment, they removed you from the class that instant. That instant, I came for one of my friends and colleagues, the next person said, he missed an objective and he's gone. But even in that environment, right, the critical media pedagogy, we found a way for it to work. So I'm not saying that it's easy, but I do think that it is possible. Yes?
Sorry, I just really want to comment on all the work you're doing. Reemphasize what someone said, there are not that many classes in how to teach like this. So I hope that it will become more prevalent within TC and other schools. And I just want to confirm that I worked at the Board of Ed some years ago when it was the Board of Ed. And I would go looking, I would go out to schools to assess programs. I would go looking for the buildings that look like this. Really seriously. And then I would find sometimes a teacher who wanted to do something really special, but was not allowed to do that over and over and over. And I found one school in which one principal focused on the culture. And the kids were they were so excited. So all that you're saying, I've seen a lot of that, and I'm just so pleased that you're bringing this out to TC. Thank you so much.
And you're right. I think we need to do more of it here, but I think that we need to shout from the rooftops. One of the things that I really want people to understand is it's happening in so many places, even in this city, right? It is happening. It's not happening every place. It's not happening in most places, but it's happening in a lot of places. And you can start to see the changes that are happening. But how do we share that? Right? And how do we make ourselves more a part of it? How do we hold ourselves, how do I hold myself accountable, like to the question you asked, right? What do I need to do differently in my teaching? How do I need to be more involved in my program? And I think about that. I take that to heart, that we really do need to create those sorts of spaces. And that's a part of the change that I think is happening. And I can point to amazing faculty across departments that are, but it's definitely something we have to do more of. And I think that's what we're trying to do with the Institute, what I'm trying to do as an individual faculty member. With that, I'll close it. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a real privilege to be able to speak.